Hi, my name is Diana Smith, and I did a film analysis on Mrs. Doubtfire. The synopsis for Mrs. Doubtfire is when Dan Hillard had gotten into a divorce with his ex-wife Miranda Hillard, and because of that, he wasn't able to see his kids due to the judge's statement. So, he ended up dressing up as a babysitter known as Miss Doubtfire, who's a 60-year-old English woman that he created. The characters in this movie are Dan Hillard, Miranda Hillard, their 3 children, Linda, Chris, and Natalie Hillard, Stu, which is Miranda's love interest, Mr. Lundy, who later helps Dan Hillard create Mrs. Doubtfire as a children's person on a TV show, and Mrs. Silner, who has to come over to Dan's apartment, to make sure he's up to date and is trying to do everything the judge has stated. Now, the 6 concepts I had found in this movie are affectionate communication, ambush listener, backstabbing, deception by commission, ego conflict, and indirect termination strategies. Now, the first concept was affectionate communication, verbal messages, nonverbal gestures, and supportive activities that convey love, fondness, and/or positive regard. A good scene that describes this is when Dan picks up his kids from school in the very beginning of the movie, and they get extremely excited and start telling him about everything they start to learn. Dan follows this by immediately showing happiness and gratitude for what they have learned for the day. The second concept is ambush listener, as a person who is overly critical and judgmental when listening to others. A good example of this is when Dan, who is disguised as Mrs. Doubtfire, starts talking about how her husband died, and after his death, she committed to complete celibacy for the rest of her life, and how everyone else should do the same. The third concept, backstabbing, acts of aggression that cause someone or someone's personal or professional harm, and the scene that shows this is when, after Dan had done everything the judge had asked of him, he had built an amazing apartment and kept a job for more than just a few days or weeks. But even after this, his ex-wife Miranda did not stand up for him when the judge stated that he would only get to see watched over instances of meeting his children. He would always have a supervisor. She never stood up to this, nor claimed they should have joint custody. Now, the fourth concept, deception by commission, is a deliberate presentation of false information. This is a good example from the scene of when Dan was calling Miranda with all fake different characters and voicemails and such. And when he called her as Mrs. Doubtfire, he stated that he was a 60-year-old English woman who had previously taken care of kids and knew how to cook and clean and do all these miraculous things, which he later had to give her the name Mrs. Doubtfire. Now, the fifth concept, the ego conflict, is a conflict in which the original issue is ignored as partners attack each other's self-esteem. The scene that best shows this is after Dan had secretly held a party for their son. And of course, when Miranda comes home, she's absolutely infuriated because she was called out of work by the neighbor who was complaining of the noise. And after they have this argument, they don't realize the children are watching. So as they watch and argue over it and decide on a divorce, Chris later thinks it's his own fault for causing the divorce, which later Dan has to tell him it is not. Now, the sixth concept I found is indirect termination strategies, attempts to break up a relationship without explicitly stating the desire to do so. 2 good examples of this are when Dan, first time dressed as Mrs. Doubtfire, had started talking with Stu, and when he saw Stu's Mercedes, and when he saw his Mercedes, he took off the little ornament on top. And when he showed it to Dan, he said, normally you guys that have a lot of big money get big fancy cars to insinuate they have something they really don't. And another example of this is when Mrs. Doubtfire is telling Stu all the crazy things Miranda does in the bedroom. including that she has many power tools and such, and also has crabs, STDs, sorry, STDs. And these are my references. I will clip that, because I can do that on YouTube.